Horn with Bob Kincaid is community radio weekdays on FYNation.com at 6pm Eastern. If it's Moran Monday or Friday on the Front Porch, Bob Kincaid brings his talent to the news of the day with the Horn Community Commune participating, and you can too. Hope to see you there at 6pm Eastern Monday through Friday.
Pet to Wash Day. My friends and relatives, welcome to the Red Road Radio Show. I'm your host, Lou Hastings from the Native Now Foundation, and I want to welcome you to another live edition of the Red Road Radio Show. Real happy to be here with you. I want to give you the phone number right out of the gate. We have a very special guest tonight who I'm going to introduce in a moment, but I want to make sure that all of our listeners, as you know, every time we have a live show, I like to fling open the phone lines for you guys to be able to call in with any questions or comments. That number is 810-479-4394, or you can, if you're on Twitter, hashtag FYI Live. We'll be able to see that. We've got that screen open all the time, and of course, as always, you can go to FYNation.com, jump in the chat room there. And there's always a great group of folks in that chat room that are willing to engage one another and, more importantly, engage the show. Because, as I always tell you, as listeners, you are part of the show, and you are the best part of the show. And that's what we need. We need more engagement. We need more discussion, especially when it comes to Indigenous issues, not just in this country, but all over the world. And that's some of the things that we try to do here on the Red Road Radio Show. And some of the other things that we do on the Red Road Radio Show is to bring you great guests who can actually speak to issues that are important, not just to Indigenous communities and tribal nations, but to all of us. That is the whole purpose of this show. To prove that these issues affect every single one of us. And we don't get to hear about a lot of these stories often. So I want to, right out of the gate, introduce our special guest for this evening, Kevin Gilbert, who is a live streamer, a poet, a public speaker, and a documentarian. And he is joining us live from Canada. Kevin, can you hear us?
And it looks like we just lost Canada. Kevin, I am trying to call him right back. So hopefully, you gotta love Skype. But hopefully we can reach him back and get him right back on the line. And let's see if he will connect back. Here he is. Trying to call back in. Kevin, if you could just bear with us, I'm going to put you on with Lou and connect the call. Sorry about that. One moment, okay?
No problem. Is that your end or mine?
Thank you. All right. Sorry about that. We're just connecting him back, and this should all work out, I hope. Yeah, he's trying to call back in. Lou, let me call. Okay. Okay, sorry about the technical difficulties. I have Kevin right on the line, and I am adding Lou. on the line right now with us. So let me add Lou on the line. Unfortunately, Skype sometimes gives us issues. And Kevin, I appreciate Skype is a wonderful tool when it works, and it's an unnecessary tool when it
we
doesn't.
are back.
Yes.
Okay. So I apologize to our listeners, but yes, we sometimes have technical issues on the show. It's unfortunate when we have a guest, but we do have a guest. And Kevin Gilbert is with us tonight. He is a live streamer, poet, public speaker, and documentarian. Kevin, thank you so much for being on the Red Road Radio Show tonight.
You're very welcome, Lou. It's my pleasure to be here. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine, and I'm sure that our listeners can hear you as well. You are a very busy man, so I have a lot of questions. I hope they are the same questions that our listening audience would want to ask you as well. I know you're extremely busy and traveling all over, and we'll get to that in due course. But I really wanted to talk to you about one concept that I've been sort of promoting and speaking about on this radio program for a number of months now. And I talk about Standing Rock as really a catalyst in tribal relations and in this country and around the world. So I kind of refer to a timeline as before Standing Rock and after Standing Rock. And I think that you can probably say that same thing, can you not?
Absolutely. 100%. Standing Rock was a moment in world history. It's been a long time coming, for sure. And it's definitely started, and it's not the end, it's the beginning of something very, very special.
So I have to tell you, we talked very briefly off air earlier today, and I don't know how much of this we really got to speak of because we didn't have too much time. But my family, my Honka family, is in Standing Rock, and when your family is threatened, and when your family's water supply is threatened, you go. And that's what prompted me to go. And I went in late August, and I was there for a little while and camped out in Ocheti Shekoin with family members for that time. And then I had to come back to my day-to-day life. And I wanted to ask you, first of all, what prompted you to go to Standing Rock in the first place, and when did you arrive?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because it's a little bit hard to answer, and I'll tell you for why. Originally, I first saw about Standing Rock while I was in South America, in Colombia. I was watching it with, I saw friends, people I knew from the conscious music industry, people like Kelly Love, who was one of the first water protectors to be arrested. I believe it was August 10th or 11th, when the first arrest happened and the first action was led by Mikase. And she had run in with the runners, she had come in with the runners from Washington, the International Indigenous Youth Council and the Standing Rock Youth. And I was watching this from Colombia, and at the time I was stuck in Colombia because I'd had my passport stolen and I couldn't get back, so I was waiting to come back. And when I was eventually able to come back, I wanted to get to Standing Rock a couple of times, and my ride fell through, and it just wasn't my time to be there. And I ended up going out to Indiana with a friend who has a non-profit, and they go from place to place, sustainable communities, helping build infrastructure, compost toilets, solar panels, geodesic domes. And they were heading out to a little festival, and that was in Indiana. And while I was at that festival, Kelly Love actually came from Standing Rock, and she was traveling with a small group from Standing Rock, including some elders, which unfortunately at that time I don't remember their names. and they were heading back to Standing Rock. So I was desperate to get to Standing Rock, and I still didn't have a way to get there. So, and that particular bus that we went on to this festival was heading to Mississippi Stand. Now, Mississippi Stand, for people that don't know, was in Keokuk, Iowa, and it's the other end of the Dakota Access Pipeline, where the pipeline goes underneath the Mississippi to Illinois. And at that point in time, it hadn't finished drilling, and the pipeline wasn't underneath the Mississippi. So I was heading down there to drop off some kitchen equipment from this festival and help build a kitchen. And I ended up, instead of being there one day, I ended up being there. It was close on a month. When that finished and they'd put the pipe underneath the Mississippi River, that camp kind of disbanded, and there were supplies there that needed to go to Standing Rock. So there was a gentleman called Chris Lawson, and Chris Lawson was the state coordinator for the Jill Stein campaign in Iowa, and they organized a donation drive. So a U-Haul was rented and driven to Iowa City, and there was a small donation drive in Iowa City, and then I believe it was in Des Moines, if I remember rightly. And I was going to be traveling up to Standing Rock, but I wasn't going to be driving because I didn't have a driver's license, because that was also stolen. However, the gentleman who rented the U-Haul at the last minute decided he was staying in Des Moines with the Catholic Workers Charity. So here we were with a truck full of supplies for Standing Rock, Chris Lawson in another place in Iowa, and the guy that was going to drive the truck had just decided that he wasn't on this mission. So I ended up driving the U-Haul without a license, full of supplies, for what had been categorized as an illegal encampment. So
wow.
What could go wrong, eh? So what could go wrong?
What could go wrong?
So we ended up heading up. Fortunately, nothing did. We headed up there. We pulled into the casino. It took us I think it was about a 16-hour drive, if I remember rightly. Me and Chris shared the driving. There were some other people that were coming up in cars as well. And it was basically just to drop off the donations. And those guys were leaving after a day. Now, I'd already been in contact with someone's mum whose daughter was there. And she had put me in contact with her daughter, and her daughter had actually had a photo that had gone viral. She had taken a picture of a little girl who was holding a mirror shield and mirroring back the image of the Morton County militarized police force. And that got picked up by the Huffington Post and went viral. So I'd seen this, and I'd kind of reached out. So when we got up there, at that time, a lot of supplies were going to Sacred Stone. And what we were being told was, Sacred Stone's quite small, and they've got pretty much everything they need. But Ocheti-Sakowin camp, is really desperately in need, because it was shortly after, on the 27th, they'd raided the North Camp. So Ocheti-Sakowin had really changed and was really beginning to grow, and it didn't have the stuff they needed. So she said, "Please, can you bring this stuff to us?" So we got there and met her, and she led us around camp and showed us, there was a place for the medical supplies, there was a place for the stuff that had bought for horses, there was a place for the food, the wet food, the dry food, there was a place for the clothes donations. And then once we'd emptied our U-Haul, there was a huge pile of summer clothes in bags that people had sent with love in their heart, but weren't very helpful for Standing Rock. So there was this constant flow of things coming in and out. So we ended up loading up the U-Haul and heading off into Bismarck to go and drop off the things that weren't needed. I believe they went to Goodwill. And then we went to the dump, because you could we went there with another car in tow with a couple of people with chainsaws, because at the dump you could buy wood. So then we went to the dump and we got, I think it was about 2 tons of wood, because that was all we were allowed to carry in that vehicle, if I remember rightly. And we brought that back to camp. And the U-Haul was really meant to go back that day. We extended it an extra day. And the next day we took another load of clothes out to Bismarck. And the girl came with me that time, and she drove me back to camp, and she got a tent already set up for me with it was a 3-season tent with a canvas over it, and that's where I spent my time the majority of the time at Standing Rock. I got there, I think it was about the 6th of November, I believe was the date we got there, and one of the first actions that we went on was beautiful. It was the Mandan Prayer Walk, and Susan Sarandon was speaking in the park. And I remember being stood in the park, and I was live streaming, because that's kind of something that I'd started to do, and I'd started to grow a little bit of an audience for. And as I'm live streaming, I suddenly realized the girl stood next to me is someone that had been down in Iowa with us at Mississippi Stand. It was her. Her name was Falana. We called her Nana, and another friend, Abby, and they had been at the treaty camp originally, which was right up where the desecration of the sacred ground and the burials had happened, and they were part of that very small camp up on called the treaty camp. So it was just incredible. We went down into Mandan and got to see everyone shaking the hands of the officers who had days before been pulling people out of an Ipi and putting people in cages like dogs with numbers on their arms. And here we were with a native-led action where they'd gone to forgive these people and offer them forgiveness because they didn't understand what they were doing. They didn't understand the spirits they were disturbing. They didn't understand what they were bringing on, not only on themselves, but their families. And that was an incredible experience. And I remember they had someone from the International Youth Council speaking. They had Red Fawn, her uncle was there speaking. I believe Chase Ionai spoke, and then there were 2 or 3 other speakers outside of the court, outside of the county building or whatever they call that building down in Mandan. And I was like, wow, like these people have been persecuted and treated so horribly, and the first thing they're doing is going in peace and prayer and offering forgiveness. So that was quite the introduction to Standing Rock those first few days.
And I actually remember watching a good number of your live streams. They were lengthy, but I thought that was a good thing. I find that most live streams that actually have any kind of substance are the longer ones, because you kind of get a feel for what it's like to actually be there, and not just something that's been sort of synthesized down to what you want someone to see, like corporate media would do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And nothing typified that and really showed that more than your November 20th video.
But actually, even before that, I would be remiss if we didn't mention this. Do you remember when it was a female-led, it was a women's prayer march to go to the man camps? Because when these pipelines come into town, what happens is the statistics for the number of indigenous women who are missing, murdered, or raped, or kidnapped goes through the roof. Because all of a sudden you've got all these out-of-town people who don't have any roots, who are in town, and there's a massive correlation with these man camps and this brutalizing of the women. So they organized a women's march, and the way it was set up was that there was going to be the elders who were going to be doing the prayers, and there were going to be the white allies there to protect them, because what was going to happen was they were going to be outside of this area where there were a lot of workers. And as we got there, I just started my live stream, and a van had pulled up, and he snaked around the crowd as we were forming up and drove straight at the elders, actually hitting one of the elders. She was okay. She just got hit on the knee, and he broke his way through and drove up the road. And then after we'd formed up, we were streaming, there was another car that came. And I was further up the road by this time, because this had kind of gone up the road. And I'd seen the car come, so I'd come back down the road as I remember it. And there was a gentleman who wanted to come drive through the whole crowd, and he wasn't able to. So I heard shouting. And then I remember watching him and following him as he drove like through the dapple land around the side. By this time, he'd run up to the front again. He pulled up in the middle of the road, just ahead of the march. He pulled a gun out, and everyone yelled gun. And he fired this gun, I think, 3 or 4 times into the air. And I was blown away by that action. And later on, I saw what I hadn't seen was when he'd first pulled up and people had got in the way of the vehicle. He'd pulled his gun out and he'd actually pistol whipped a girl that was there. So that was the first time I really was like, wow, these people, like the response to this prayer, like they're so scared of this. It was insane, and we had the helicopters flying as always, and the SWAT team were down there, and you could see the SWAT team formed up in the distance, and it was crazy, and it was like, hang about, everyone here is peaceful, prayerful, unarmed, and here's this guy with a gun, and he just gets to drive off, and I was like, that was mind blowing. It was scary.
I remember that. I remember that video, Kevin.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. When things for me really took off with the live streaming, because I was, I had maybe 3,600 people on my Facebook, a couple of thousand people following me, and I've been building that for a while. I mean, through my addiction into recovery and some motivational videos, I've been building that over a few years. So on the night of the 20th, I was in camp. And I remember hearing someone yell, my wife's just been shot. Now, earlier that evening, probably around 4 o'clock, I think, maybe a little bit after that, there had been a small group that had gone up to Highway 1806 to do something on the front lines. I'm not completely aware of what that was. And then, so I heard that someone had been shot. So I grabbed my stuff, and that night it was 23 degrees, and headed on up there. And I got up onto this, as you go towards 1806 where the blockade is, and just for your listeners that haven't been there, I'm going to describe what this says. So you've got a bridge, which is concrete on either side, and at the far end of the bridge, you've got blocks of concrete blocking the way. There were two burnt-out vehicles before that. Then there were blocks of concrete. And then there were rolls and rolls of razor wire and barbed wire. And then behind that was where you had the militarized police force, National Guard, police forces from, I believe, up 5 or 6 different states. And to the left-hand side, a little way back from the bridge, there was a hill. And that's where you could go and live stream from that hill, because you could get signal up there, usually. And signal in Standing Rock was very difficult because they were using devices to prevent live streams getting out, to make people's phones be unable to connect to data. They had false towers there, so they could try and take data from people's phones. There were a lot of underhand tactics that were being used, as well as the military police force, but on more of an info wars kind, an information kind of war as well. So that particular night, I got up there at 6:28 and started live streaming. And my feed was horrible. There were bright lights there, which my phone wanted to focus on, and it was just chaos. And there were probably about 400 people on the bridge. Now, imagine being on a bridge with 400 people. You're blocked in on the left by the wall, with the river below you. You're blocked in on the right with the river below you. Ahead of you, you have the militarized police force. And what they were using that night, they had something called the LRAD. The LRAD is a noise cannon that is designed to disorientate you. Bear in mind, this is dark. You've got 23 degrees temperature. You have water cannons being used. You have non-lethal projectiles, rubber bullets, etc., beanbag rounds. You have huge fire extinguisher-sized mace and CS gas. You have tear gas being fired in the air in like canisters that land on the ground. You have what am I missing? You had something else as well.
Weren't there percussion grenades?
Oh, concussion. Yeah, that's right. There were concussion grenades as well, which are like flashbangs designed to disorientate people. And I'm up on top of this hill, and I'm watching what's happening, and I realize my feed's no good, but what I'm doing the whole time is I am talking. I'm telling people where this is and what's happening, and I'm just giving a running commentary on it. And as I'm watching, I'm just being astounded by what I'm seeing. It's like a war zone. except it's a weird war zone. Because on one side, you've got the very people who are supposed to protect and serve people, not property, not company, not pipelines. And on the other side, you've got peaceful, unarmed, prayerful water protectors who are being brutalized. You're watching war crimes happen. You're watching things that are against the Geneva Convention. There's things in the Geneva Convention that say water can't be used in those temperatures as a weapon. That's torture. So I'm watching this. And as I'm watching it, I think my first feed was taken down. So I went straight back up and got another feed up. And I think it was the second feed, if I remember rightly. It started, it was about 30 people, then there was 50 people, then there was 100, then there was 300, then there was 500, then there was 1,000. And this feed was just going crazy. And like Senator Bernie Sanders shared it, Russia Today shared it, Dr. Jill Stein shared it. And all of a sudden, this feed has got like 40, 50,000. I can't remember what it got up to. I think it got up to 60,000 people watching it live at one point. And I was like, oh, and my battery's constantly dying. I've got people running up the hill to get me battery charges. I'm not a journalist. I'm not prepared for this. I have a phone. I have a cell phone. That's it. I don't have a tripod or anything. And there's a few other people up there. I remember Unicorn Riot were there, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but I remember seeing his phone. His phone went down. And then the next minute, it started rebooting itself. And it came up with like the DOS screen that you get on those old computers. And I can't remember what it said on the screen, but something had taken over his phone. I'd never seen that on a cell phone. It was like a safe mode, and it was doing its own thing. So there was some really strange stuff going on. And I remember watching, and the poignant part of the night for me was there was one point when I was watching what was happening, and I saw there's a device that was being fired by the Morton County side. I watched it land. I watched it catch the grass on fire. I watched the water protectors taking off jackets, stamping this fire out. All the while, this water cannon is being pointed at the other water protectors. Now, this water cannon could have put out the fire. And I said at that point, I said something along the lines of, you're going to be told in the national media tomorrow that people are here rioting and setting fires. But you just watched it live, folks. You saw the water protectors aren't setting fires. They're putting them out. Those fires are coming from Morton County and the devices that are being fired. And in fact, so many people, and I found this out afterwards, so many people got hold of NBC, who'd put out a story about rioters setting fires, and commented on it, that they ended up through the night gradually changing their story. I had people messaging me saying the national news are NBC are trying to get hold of you. Have you got a number? And I'm like, I've got one phone. I can't. Like if I hang this up, then we lose the live stream. So I'm like, hey, has anyone got a phone? And there was this young lad's like, yeah, I've got a phone. So I was like, can I put your number out there so we can speak to the media because they want to speak. He's like, yeah, sure. So we put this number out there, and within about, I don't know, it must have been half an hour, I think. Time made no sense that night. All of a sudden, he's like, I'm really sorry, I need to go. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, okay, I completely understand you need to go, but your number's the only one that the press who are watching this all over the world have to get hold. So if you need to take that phone and go, I completely understand it's your phone. But please don't, was what I was trying to say. And so people were so amazing that night. People bought me hand warmers. People bought me battery packs. I went down into vehicles on the road to go charge my phone because I couldn't go to the front line because the minute you go to the front line, I'd lose my live stream feed. So I had to stay where I was. But my friend, she came up to me. She had been down right on the front lines taking blankets and stuff because the people down there were catching hypothermia left and right. There were fires that night. You're right, there were fires. Those fires were controlled fires that were made to save lives, to make sure people did not die for standing up for what they believed in. And my friend came up, and she had been tear gassed. And she was coughing so hard. She told me I just coughed so hard I just peed my pants. And another guy came up to me, and we interviewed him. And he told me that he'd just been stood next to someone who'd just been shot in the head. I later found out that guy was called Israel. I met Israel and I saw those stitches in his head. And after that, I've even found out I'm friends now with Lee Sprague. And he was someone who carried that person from the front lines all the way back to the medics. I mean, if you weren't there, imagine a kill box. Imagine people in a box, in the dark, freezing cold, being hammered by round after round after round of tear gas. There were clouds of tear gas. You couldn't go forwards, you couldn't go left, you couldn't go right. If you panicked, you'd run backwards and trample everyone. So these people were just taking it. I mean,
Kevin, and for those of you listening, this is the Red Road Radio Show, and we are speaking with Kevin Gilbert, who was down at Standing Rock and put up so many well seen, for sure, live feeds. And we're talking about the November 20th episode. We want to take a quick break, Kevin, if you can join us after this break. And I want to come back and sort of finish out that day and then sort of move forward from there. Would that be all right with you?
Yeah, that's perfect. I can just hold on the line if you want.
Absolutely. So we're going to take a quick break here, and we'll be right back with the Red Road Radio Show right after this.
FYINation.com costs $40 a day to keep on the air. Our original content doesn't sell you mattresses or storable food when you listen. We rely on your contributions to keep our programming paywall free. If you can't contribute, word of mouth is just as important. Tweet us at #FYILive or visit our chat at FYINation.com. And thank you for supporting FYI Nation.
Are you a night owl? If so, you can stay up with me, Tom Hartman, at midnight with the Tom Hartman Program. Tom Hartman Program is paywall free thanks to your generous donation to FYINation.com.
It's the Red Road.
And welcome back to the Red Road Radio Show. I'm your host, Lou Hastings, from the Native Now Foundation. And we are visiting with Kevin Gilbert, who is actually relaying the story of Standing Rock back in November 20th to be exact, when Morton County Sheriff's Department and militarized police just rained down havoc on peaceful water protectors there at Standing Rock. And Kevin, I have to tell you that when I was watching your live feed, first of all, your delivery was captivating, because in all of what looked like absolute chaos, you seemed to be calm and relaying, as you said, you were talking over this and saying, can you see this? Please share this out. Look at there's the water. I don't know if you can see it with the lights. And I'm just going from memory from watching this while you were live streaming, saying, I don't know if you can see this, but there go the water cannons again. It was remarkable to watch your live feed while this was happening. Did at any time while you were there watching this, did you say to yourself, am I in the United States of America? Like, am I in the U.S.? What is happening here?
You know, it's hard to talk about this, Lou. It's really hard to talk about this. It's hard not to cry because it was so. It was surreal. It was disgusting. It was, yeah. You did at the time, not so much because you were in the moment, and I don't think I was really thinking in that sense. It's odd. I mean, I finished that night. I left at 2:42 in the morning because it was quiet and had been for about an hour and a half. It really quietened down, and when I left, there were maybe 40 people. So, I mean, I didn't even realize how long I'd been out there. It wasn't until I got back to camp and got into my tent I realized how cold I was. It wasn't until I took off my coat I realized there was ice on the inside of my coat. It was crazy. It was like you were in a time warp in some sense. So I don't remember my thoughts that night at all. I really don't. I was just doing what I could to just make sure other people saw this because it was unbelievable. And I hope we never see anything like that again. I fear we will, but I really hope we don't because, you know, the cries, there's a video on YouTube that a friend made for me, and it's about 3 minutes of who really started the fires. And the cries on that video for medic, we need a medic on the front lines. Front line. This is unarmed, peaceful water protectors. What the hell? It sounds like you're in a war zone. And for me, that's especially hard. I grew up a pacifist. I don't believe in violence. So yeah, it was unbelievable. I couldn't believe what was going on.
It was definitely captivating to watch it, and that was clear by seeing all of the different people that you had, the thousands, the tens of thousands of people that were watching your live stream. And like you said, I think people recognized the fact that yours was pretty much the only one getting through, or at least solidly. So they were coming to your aid with battery packs and everything. And I know that you mentioned the weather and how cold it was. All of that had an absolutely chilling effect on everybody, including myself, watching it. And my heart was absolutely breaking because, of course, you know, as I said earlier, my family is there, and I was just there. I was there pre-1806 roadblock. You know, I was watching the elders come together and the prayers that were happening at the lodge, and you know, all of these things, and to have to go home and then see what's happening after that, it was absolutely heartbreaking. So it really made me follow the story even closer, and we pretty much handled it just about every night on this radio program because, you know, we handle news in Indian country, and that was the biggest story in Indian country, hands down, every single night. So there was always something to talk about, and I was very appreciative of what you were doing. But not spending any more time on that particular day because I know it is traumatic for us, and especially for you to be there to watch it, and certainly for the people who were being their civil rights and their, you know, human rights were being abused. But I want to sort of fast forward to after that, and you actually got quite a bit of notoriety on Facebook for this, and that sort of propelled you into your what you were going to do next. It almost laid out the path for you on maybe not specific places to go, but it almost seemed like you knew what you were going to do from then forward. Am I right about that?
Yeah, you kind of are, and I think, I'm sorry, just before we leave that, there is a couple of people I have to mention from that night because they're still suffering the after effects of that night more than most. And that night was the night that Sophia Walensky nearly lost her arm and is still battling that. And Vanessa Dutton, Susie, was shot in the eye, and virtually lost the sight in one eye. And she's still out and about. I've seen her since. I've seen her down in Florida. She was at an event I was at for the Sable Trail, and a Standing Rock roundtable discussion with Manape and some other people from Standing Rock that were down there in support of Sable Trail, with some of the elders who were going to be leading the prayers and leading the awareness of what's happening in the Everglades there in Florida. So yeah, it's funny because you mentioned I'm a poet, and that's where I thought I was going before I went to Colombia last April. In March, I recorded an audio CD that's a story of my life. It's kind of a mixture between poetry and life lessons, if you like, and it talks about my addiction, my recovery, and it talks about the environment and kind of my spiritual journey. And that's really what I thought I was going to do. I had a friend's band who had kind of said I could come on tour with them, and we were looking at that. But when that happened that night at Standing Rock, and I had 77,000 people follow me overnight on Facebook. I was overnight Facebook famous. And no longer was it really my journey. Like, sometimes in life you really, really want something, and you try and push it, and eventually you push it and you kind of get there and it doesn't work out because it wasn't really meant to be yours. You kind of tried to control life, and it wasn't the direction that was destiny for you. It wasn't the director creator was sending you. So I realized, my poetry wasn't what brought me 77,000 people on my Facebook. It was this live streaming and showing the things that the real media doesn't show. So you're right, it did take me on a journey from Standing Rock. After Dave Archambault asked everyone who wasn't Standing Rock Sutra to leave, I left. And I ended up going to various places. I was invited to Oklahoma with the Diamond Pipeline, and Mikase, who led the very first action at Standing Rock, Mikase Camp Hornick, who is Casey Camp's son. Casey Camp, of course, is a huge activist in Indian country. And he invited me down to Oklahoma, and I went to the Ponca Nation there, White Eagle Reservation, where they have a carbon black plant. And this carbon black plant is from Taiwan, I believe it is. And they grew this reservation. On this reservation, they hunt and they grow their own organic garden for the elders, for the kids, and for people with diabetes. And they're going to sell these vegetables into the local community. And when it comes to wanting to be able to use this food, although they followed every single rule for organic garden, they can't because it's so polluted from the pollution from this carbon black plant that's on their reservation, and the frack wells that are on their reservation leaking out toxic gases into the air. So I started to see this pattern of everywhere there's pipelines, everywhere there's mines, they're in Indian country, right on the reservations. Because way back when, the people that originally were here and knew how to take care of this land, they lost that, and they were made to own land and forced into these areas and had these trail of tears and the trail of death, where they all had to change where they were living and go to other places. And then when these places that were given to them said, hey, you can have this land is yours, this is what you get. Now the same thing's happening. They're going in and saying, well, actually underneath this land there's some oil we want. Actually underneath this land there's some uranium we want. Actually underneath this land there's some copper we want. So we're going to come and take that, and we're going to destroy your sacred sites. We're going to destroy the environment. We know you hunt and fish, but we're going to pollute everything, so you're eating polluted food. So, and no one says anything about it. You don't see it on the press. You see about the neighbor's cat stuck up the tree. That's what the local news shows. God knows why. I've never understood that.
You're absolutely right. And, again, that's one of the reasons for the Red Road Radio Show. I actually started this show a few years back in Southwest Florida, and I know the people down there that are battling the Sable Trail pipeline, and I do know the people who are out there protecting the Everglades and who have been against the River of Grass Greenway project. Bobby C. Billy and
I met Bob,
Betty Osceola.
I met them both.
Bobby's great people. And Betty's a good friend of mine, and I'm thankful for that. So now that I'm in the Northeast, it really showed me when I started the show, as you said, you don't get to see these stories in mainstream media or corporate media because no one's interested in it. But no one's interested in it because they don't know about it. And it takes people like the folks that are getting together at all these other camps. And it takes the people that go to Standing Rock and make enough noise that they cannot be ignored. And they did their best, Kevin. The corporate media did their best to try and ignore Standing Rock until they couldn't anymore. And they couldn't because of people like you who put it up there live so that people could see it on Facebook. Millions of people could see it and say, you know what? I can't believe this is happening. And this is not a made up story. This is right now happening in our country and to these people. So you're right. This is important work. This is work that, as you said, sometimes you don't know which direction the creator is going to point you in. But I'm certainly thankful that he was able to point you in this direction. I want to also let people know that they can go to letyoursoulplay.com, correct?
Yeah, they can indeed. They'll be able to link out to the YouTube channel there. They can also, there's a poetry CD out there that I use to help as medicine for people that are struggling to love themselves, going through addiction, going through self-doubt issues, or just want some motivation in their life. And that's what I use right now to be able to stay on the road. That and just living on kindness. Right now, I'm actually coming at you from Canada. I'm on the unceded territory of Wacomican. On Manitoulin Island, which is the world's largest freshwater island, actually sat in the Great Lakes, which is 20% of the world's fresh surface water. And we have Pipeline 5 here that goes underneath the Straits of Mackinac, pumping 1 million gallons an hour of sweet crude and other things. 250 feet on the bottom of the Straits of Mackinac. It's been there 50 years. It was meant to be there a maximum of 50 years. It was put in 1953. And just recently, now in its 64th year, Enbridge have come out and said, it's allowed to be there indefinitely. And it's missing things from the original easement agreement of the structure that's supposed to be on the pipes to protect it. The coating's coming off there. And right now, they're looking at putting some additional support structure. And the argument is that because it's support structure, it's actually not maintenance, it's construction. And if they have to do construction, it should trigger an environmental analysis or an environmental impact statement. Well, as this is 20% of the world's fresh surface water with an aging pipeline that isn't needed, even the oil companies know it's not needed because they look at the flow rates that they've increased. They've increased the rate through this pipe. The Straits of Mackinac, the currents have increased over time. And so when the pipe was first here, the volumes of oil that are traveling now, because they've increased the volumes in other pipes, it's quite possible to just stop this, take this out and continue to do what they're doing. But they're not even listening to the people. And it's funny because the federally recognized tribes were only federally recognized, I believe, the Grand Traverse Bay of Odawa and Chippewa Indians in Traverse City, Michigan. They were recognized in, I believe, 1980. They've never been consulted about this. This is they have a 50-50 right on this water with the state to take care of it, but they've never been consulted. So that's why we're up here. And I met someone at a rally, and she said, "Oh, hey, I'm going to Canada on Friday. You want to come and I maybe meet a chief and sit down with some of the elders because we water walk here every year since 2008. They walk for 14 days the whole Lake of Huron, the whole of the water on the reservation. And actually, I'm in one of the elders' house right now. One of the water walkers here. That's where we're doing this from. And these are the funniest, nicest people. If you ever get the chance to come to Wacomican and meet the Wiki people, you won't stop laughing for days.
That's great to hear. And I'm glad that that you're able to fill us in on this newest venture, and certainly what's happening with up there at Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa. The Enbridge line number 5. If people have not seen anything about this, certainly look it up and look up what Kevin Gilbert has been putting out. You've had a lot of great live streams from there already, and you even put together a small piece that I shared on my Facebook page and on the Red Road Radio Show's Facebook page. Fantastic that you put up since you've been up there, right? This piece together.
Yeah, it's up on YouTube as well, so anyone who's listening can go out and go onto the YouTube channel and find it there for sure. And, we're going to continue doing this. It's got to the stage where we need to go to another level. So next week, we're going to be putting together a non-profit called Spark the Change. And I'm very happy to announce, and extremely honored to announce, that 3 members, 3 tribal citizens, the Director of Environment, the Director for Natural Resources, and one of the tribal councilmen from Grand Traverse Bay Band of Odawa and Chippewa Indians have actually asked to be on the board. So there's going to be 3 tribal citizens on the board with myself to start with, and we're being fiduciary sponsor by Cindy Gomez of KPPP Radio up in the Dakotas, like 88.4, I think it is. Sorry, Cindy, if I got that wrong. You probably know, though, huh?
That's fantastic, Kevin. I'm so glad to hear that. So, Spark the Change will be coming out as a new nonprofit, and certainly, if the Native Now Foundation can ever work with you guys, we'd love to do it and help out in any way that we can. So just let me know, and certainly I have a feeling that you and I are going to stay in touch. You're certainly welcome to come on this show anytime that you want.
Well, thank you. That's very, very, very kind, and I certainly appreciate being on here. And I mean, I would love to share a poem I wrote about Standing Rock if there is time tonight, but if there's not, I understand.
Absolutely, there's time, Kevin. I just want to tell you that in Pennsylvania, and I put this on a couple of your live feeds, we're also fighting the Penn East pipeline, which happens to be going through my county where my home is. So 2 fronts: my home and my family out in Standing Rock, and here in Pennsylvania, we're being assaulted by these fossil fuels. And if you ever get the opportunity to come down this way, I'll buy you a cup of coffee, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about. But absolutely, can you give us some of your poetry?
About that? Yeah, let's talk off air about that, and maybe we can do some once we've got help. Once we've got Spark the Change up, maybe we can do some kind of event for awareness down there together or something. So there's definitely possibilities for sure.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I can share a poem. It was originally written as 2 poems, but they kind of run together. So I now read them as one. And it was shared on the steps of the Capitol in Denver for the Native Nations march that was in solidarity with the march that was in Washington. And that's an event that was helped by a lady called Mary Ryan, or Molly Kills Enemies. And she does a lot of work in Denver, organizing events. She focuses on the missing and murdered Indigenous women, and she invited me that day to be a speaker amongst other people. And this is what I shared. From Standing Rock to the Sable Trail, when we use these tactics, we can never fail. So peacefully standing is the only way, no matter what games they play. Love and prayer against guns and gas. Soon this madness will come to pass. So stay strong, my friends, and hold that belief, for knowing only this will bring relief. Because to win this war with a weapon of love, that was what was written long before in those stars above. To stand protecting the water and the earth, for the end is coming and will be a rebirth. For you and me are the ones who are chosen to melt the hearts of those still frozen, to blind them with our love so bright, to trust our instinct and pray, not fight. So to all the brothers and sisters on those many front lines, we feel your pain and hold you in our hearts and minds. We lift you up and send you the strength to carry on. Keep sharing the love as the war is already won. Standing Rock was the seed for a movement, a great uprising that spread continent to continent. People from every nation, all relations, all generations, coming together with dignity, unity, and patience. Those peaceful warriors that felt the often forgotten connection to Mother Earth, putting her protection ahead of jobs, material possessions, and all that defines Western wealth. Going back to the ways from the elders of generations past. You know, the ones who knew this materialistic age would never last. Their silent voices were singing in every flake of snow and whistle of the wind. They're gently guiding us back to the old ways so recently binned, letting us feel and see how we could live together in harmony, to fight for her cause with no need for a huge armory, to treasure that feeling of connection to both human and beast, again understanding that simple pleasure of creating and sharing a feast. So even though that battle's moved from the North Dakota prairie, we don't need to accept a world that's twisted and scary. For now we all know that power that together we wield, just from simply gathering and praying in a field. Our ability to truly shape a better future for the next generations to come, one where the weapon of unified voices replaces the destructive power of the gun.
Wow. Thank you, brother, for sharing that. For all of you listeners out there, we were visiting with Kevin Gilbert. And Kevin, fantastic. I'm so glad that you were able to come on the show. Please come on again and stay in touch with me, will you?
Absolutely, Lou. And it would be remiss of me to leave without mentioning to your viewers and listeners out there that this is your 100th show. So that's quite a milestone, my friend, and I hope to be listening when you hit the 500th show, my friend.
You know what? You'll have to be on that one, Kevin. You'll have to be on that one.
All right, it's a deal.
Okay, it sounds good. And everybody out there listening, please go to letyoursoulplay.com. That is where you can purchase some of Kevin's CDs and his poetry, and certainly follow those live streams on Facebook. Those are some of the most poignant and important milestones in not just history of Indian country, but world history. This is going to go down as one of those moments in time where everything changed. And that's what we're hoping for, and that's what we're pushing for. And Kevin, thank you for all that you do.
The same to you, brother. We all come from the sacred water, the sacred land, and we all go back to the sacred land. It doesn't matter if we're white, black, red, or yellow. We all drink that same water. Water doesn't judge. Water just flows. And we need that water, not for ourselves, but for those future generations. So it's all our job to just stand up and use our voices to protect and to let people know what's right.
Absolutely. And with that, I'm going to say thank you all for listening as always, and join us next time on the Red Road Radio Show. Have a great night, everybody.